But first, it isn't often that a news headline has the ability to stop you in your tracks, drop your jaw, leave you speechless. And I mean legitimate headlines, not guy makes big money off YouTube headlines like CNN.com will happily put on a t-shirt for you. Today we got one of these for real, jaw-dropping headlines. U.S. Vice President admits to war crime. Can you say bombshell? In his latest legacy-polishing exit interview, Vice President Dick Cheney acknowledged for the first time, without trepidation or apparent fear of prosecution, that he authorized torture techniques to be used against prisoners. He was asked and answered specifically about waterboarding. Waterboarding, you may recall from the Tokyo trials after World War II, when an international coalition, including us, convened to prosecute Japanese officials and military personnel accused of war crimes, including waterboarding. A number of those found guilty of waterboarding, American troops and allied troops and civilians, people found guilty of waterboarding, those folks were sentenced to death and hanged. We hanged people for waterboarding as a war crime in Dick Cheney's lifetime. With that as the historical context, the vice president cavalierly told ABC News that he specifically approved that same technique being used against the prisoner named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Did you authorize the tactics that were used against Khalid Sheikh Mohammed?
I was aware of the program, certainly, and involved in helping get the process cleared. That is, the agency, in effect, came in and wanted to know what they could and couldn't do. And they talked to me as well as others to explain what they wanted to do, and I supported it.
And on KSM, one of those tactics, of course, widely reported was waterboarding, and that seems to be a tactic we no longer use. Even that, you think, was appropriate?
I do.
Well, knock me over with a feather duster. It appears that the sitting Vice President of the United States just admitted to approving a practice that was once punishable by death by our country. The I approved waterboarding and I'd do it again admission came during another one of these victory lap interviews from President Bush and Vice President Cheney in their remaining 30-plus days on the job. Later in the same interview, Cheney said of his so-called enhanced interrogation technique program, he said this, quote, "It's been a remarkably successful effort. I think the results speak for themselves." So that would be results like catching Osama bin Laden, catching the number 2 guy in al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and the head guy in the Taliban, Mullah Omar. Results like wiping out al-Qaeda, like wiping out the Taliban, like turning the Muslim world toward moderation against extremism. Because it would be awesome if we had had results like that. Instead, we've had the prosecution of Osama bin Laden's chauffeur. We've had 14,000 terrorism deaths worldwide last year. We've had a 4-fold increase of worldwide deaths due to terrorism in the 8 years before that. Asked by ABC if he has any regrets, the vice president said, quote, "Oh, not a lot at this stage." Asked about the offshore prison at Guantanamo Bay, where the Red Cross found U.S. personnel using tactics that they described as tantamount to torture, the vice president says he is a man who likes what he sees there.
I think Guantanamo has been very well run. Guantanamo has been very, very valuable, and I think they'll discover that trying to close it's a very hard proposition.
A very hard proposition. The Bush administration does appear to be making it as hard as possible for anybody to close Guantanamo down, but I say don't hold your breath, Mr. Vice President. I think you'll find that everything you have done can be undone. Except maybe the bringing back to life of the people, the tens of thousands of people who have died in Iraq.
I think as I look at the intelligence with respect to Iraq, what they found was that Saddam Hussein still had the capability to produce weapons of mass destruction.
That is so not what they found. That's actually the opposite of what they found. The Iraq Study Group in 2004 found that Saddam Hussein had the desire for weapons of mass destruction, but not the capacity. Not the capacity. What they found was that Saddam Hussein still had the capability to produce weapons of mass destruction. No. Not at all what they found, actually. Totally wrong about that one. The White House is actively trying to sell us the war in Iraq again, now, against all of the widely known, fact-based, nearly universally accepted cases against it. A wise man once said, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, can't get fooled again."
Fool me once, shame on you. It fooled me. We can't get fooled again.
You can't get fooled again, right? Right? So here's the political question. For these last 35 days or so of the Bush administration, why is there seemingly no pushback against the revisionist history that is being pumped out of the White House right now? If a person drinks and drives and crashes into your living room, the rest of us, with the government as our proxy, take that person's keys away. You did a very bad thing. You are no longer allowed the chance to do that again. In this case, Bush and Cheney are still drunk, still in that car, still sitting in the rubble of our living room, revving the engine and asking if we want to go for another spin around the block with them. The public has actually spoken here in the most effective way that we can. The 2006 midterm elections and the 2008 presidential elections, two Democratic anti-Bush landslides. The verdict from the public is in. We've got a new president-elect who was against the Iraq war from the get-go, says he will close Guantanamo, and he's unequivocally against torture. And a new Washington Post poll shows 70% of Americans support Obama's plan to get out of Iraq in 16 months. 70%! The world now sees us as a disaster. The guy who threw a shoe at our current president is being hailed as a hero in much of the world. An overwhelming majority of Americans have come to agree that the past 8 years of American foreign policy, if nothing else, were just unacceptable. And when we're working on the future of the country, which hopefully we're always doing, and we're scouring our own history for good and bad examples of how to act, one might hope that a near universal consensus against some bad idea like drunk driving or invading Iraq would consign an idea like that to the big circular file of American history marked waste, the proverbial dustbin of history. Just as an example, the U.S. government apologized for the illegal internment of Japanese citizens that took place after Pearl Harbor. Reparations were paid to those who were interned. That is a for the history books judgment rendered that is intended to leave no ambiguity, no doubt for future generations. What went on here was wrong. Don't do it again. Anybody proposes doing something like this again, laugh them out of the room. So instead of just glossing over the vice president's war crimes admission on ABC News, should something be done here? Is it possible that some of the many public officials elected as a rebuke to Bush and Cheney could do something official as a statement for the record, just for future reference?